What happens when the woman the entire hotel tried to humiliate turns out to be the one who owns the entire building? As the revolving glass door slowly closed behind her, the entire lobby of the Fairbourne Hotel seemed to pause for a moment. No one noticed the woman who had just walked in. She didn't draw attention, didn't carry designer luggage, didn't have an assistant by her side. Just a charcoal grey hoodie, dark jeans, neatly tied curly hair, and a clean, makeup-free face. That was how Avery Quinn chose to return to the very hotel she had built, quietly, unannounced. She didn't need a concierge rushing out to greet her, nor did she want anyone bowing in deference to the name printed on the shareholder board. What she needed now was not recognition, but truth. The kind of truth that only appears when no one knows who you are, when no one feels obliged to be polite. And indeed, the truth revealed itself faster than she had expected. Behind the front desk, a young employee named Trey looked up, glanced briefly at her face and modest outfit, then turned his eyes back to the computer screen, not bothering to hide his indifference. "Can I help you?" His voice wasn't cold, but it lacked any warmth. Avery smiled gently and replied, "I have a suite reservation under the name Quinn. Could you please check for me?" Trey typed a few keys, then frowned. "I don't see any reservation under that name." Avery nodded, still calm. "It might be under Chiron Hospitality Group. I believe Suite 1702 was reserved." Now Trey looked more closely, and his expression shifted noticeably. Not to surprise, but to suspicion, the kind often reserved for people pretending to be important. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that suite is reserved for corporate or executive guests only, and you're not on the list." That sentence wasn't just a denial. It was a quiet dismissal, the kind a system uses when it's learned to judge people by appearances. Avery glanced around, silently noting each detail. The curious looks from two guests seated at the bar, the security guard subtly shifting at the entrance as if ready to intervene if she caused trouble, and the way no one in the room ever paused to ask themselves, "Could I be wrong?" None of them knew that the woman they were doubting was the one who had approved the design of this very lobby, who had personally invested every dollar into the marble under their feet, who had selected the soft jazz playing overhead. But Avery wasn't angry. She hadn't come to be angry. She came to observe, and she had already seen what she needed to, within the very first moment she stepped through the door. Avery remained in front of the reception desk, not feeling the need to step aside or explain herself any further. Her composure and intentional silence began to shift the energy in the lobby. Trey, sensing something unusual but unwilling to soften his cold demeanor, pressed a button beneath the desk. Within seconds, Gavin, the night shift security guard with a rigid frame and watchful eyes, appeared beside Avery. He said nothing, simply stood close enough to suggest a warning. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, not addressing Avery, but Trey, as if defaulting to an old reflex of picking a side before hearing a word. "She's insisting on checking into a room that's not on the list," Trey responded, half apologetic, half accusatory. Avery turned slowly to Gavin, unwavering. "I'm not causing a scene. I'm simply waiting for confirmation of an internal reservation." Gavin nodded, but his eyes remained unchanged, a familiar look cast on those who are judged not by their actions, but by how much they appear to belong. Just then, a well-dressed, middle-aged couple entered the hotel. As Avery continued to wait, another staff member greeted the couple with a smile, handed over their key, and guided them upstairs without hesitation. No one asked for ID. No one questioned them. They were not required to prove anything. Avery watched quietly, without bitterness, but with sharp awareness. She didn't envy privilege, but she understood intimately how privilege operates. Soon after, Monica arrived, the night manager, blonde hair pinned up, makeup flawless, and a clipboard clutched tightly to her chest, like a shield of administrative authority. She offered a measured smile, but her voice was as cold as a policy clause. "I understand there's been a mix-up. I'm sorry, but we can't release Suite 1702 without verification from upper management. It's our policy." Avery nodded, then calmly retrieved her ID and business card from her pocket. It read, "Avery Quinn, Chief Executive Officer, Chiron Group." Monica glanced at it for barely the length of a breath, then handed it back with a sentence that froze the room. "You look different than I imagined." Avery didn't need to ask, but she did, her voice barely above a whisper, falling into the silence like a stone into still water. "What exactly did you imagine?" Monica didn't answer. She simply turned and said quietly to Gavin, "Please have her sit over there while I check with corporate." Avery did not move. "I'll stand here." In that moment, the hotel lobby stopped being a space of hospitality. It became a stage. Every glance, every movement, every word and silence turned into the clearest expression of what they claimed to have outgrown. Discrimination that never needs to be shouted. It only needs the air to breathe. And tonight, they were exposing themselves, flawlessly, without any help at all. While the hotel lobby remained tense like a tightly drawn string, Avery pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. No introduction, just 3 calm words. "Activate Charleston." Then she ended the call. No one around her heard the content of the conversation, but her composure alone began to unsettle those nearby, even if they couldn't explain why. Trey looked over at Monica. Monica glanced at Gavin. Suddenly, each person became acutely aware of their own unconscious behavior. Avery stepped aside and leaned gently against the large glass panel at the front of the lobby. The streetlights outside cast soft reflections across her face, unable to mask the sharp focus etched into her features. In that moment, she was no longer standing in the Fairborn Hotel. Her mind had drifted to a different hallway, a different time, where fluorescent lights flickered like warnings and the spotless tiles mirrored the worn soles of her shoes. Back then, Avery was 16 years old, holding a mop in her hand, quietly working the night shift at a public hospital where her mother, a nurse clocking endless hours, was constantly on the brink of exhaustion. They couldn't afford rent. The power had been cut for 3 days. The refrigerator was empty, and the smell of spoiled milk was the first thing Avery woke up to each morning. She didn't work because she wanted to. She worked because without the extra shifts, her family would slip further into the shadows they had spent years clawing their way out of. She remembered the glass jar on top of the fridge, taped with a piece of paper scrawled in uneven handwriting, "To buy something of my own." Avery no longer remembered who had written that message. She just remembered how it made her ask herself every morning, "Could I?" And day by day, week by week, she poured every cent of her first wages into that jar, because she refused to remain someone who merely had permission to exist. She wanted to own the space around her. Now, standing in the very hotel she had designed, in which she was the largest shareholder, Avery understood one thing. No title could shield you from the gaze of those who had already decided in their minds that you did not belong. She didn't need them to recognize her. She only needed them to reveal who they truly were. And they were doing exactly that, without pressure, without anyone orchestrating it. Their own prejudice was the most flawless performance of all. And Avery? She was merely the observer, but also the one rewriting the script. As Monica turned her back to head toward the office, ready to continue the game of internal verification, a calm voice echoed from the revolving glass door. A distinguished man in a beige wool coat stepped inside, his silver hair neatly combed, his eyes deep and full of unspoken truths. He paused halfway into the lobby, locking eyes with Avery, as if to make sure memory wasn't playing tricks on him. "Ms. Quinn?" he asked, his voice laced with quiet respect. Avery nodded without smiling. It was Mr. Hale, a long-time guest of the Fairborn, who had quietly vanished years ago after being shuffled between rooms 3 times in one night for no stated reason. He hadn't complained, hadn't left a review, just slipped away without returning. Until now. "My niece just started working here," he said, letting his eyes sweep across the room. "I came to see how she was doing, and it seems I've arrived at the right time." His gaze landed on Trey, Monica, and Gavin, who were just beginning to realize the situation had spun far beyond their control. At the same moment, over at the right side counter, Elise, the senior housekeeper with sun-worn skin and hands hardened from years of cleaning chemicals, quietly stepped out to retrieve a bottle of sanitizer. When Monica turned to her coldly and said, "Elise, you're not needed in this area right now," Elise simply nodded, said nothing, and as she passed Avery, whispered, "Just stand still, dear. Let them dig their own grave." It was a quiet remark, but it sliced through the polished veneer of the hotel like a razor. Avery didn't reply, but her eyes sharpened. Every gaze in the lobby had shifted. She was no longer the guest in the hoodie. She had become a silent force of gravity, slowing every motion and making every word a choice that could not be undone. At that moment, Pamela, the intern who had been on the job for less than 3 weeks, stood quietly near the hallway leading to the staff entrance. Her phone was recording, not with commotion or secrecy. She wasn't sure if she'd post the video, but one thing she knew for certain: if nothing was documented, this incident would be filed away as just another difficult guest. Avery turned to Pamela without saying a word, but her eyes spoke clearly. "You're doing the right thing. And sometimes that carries more weight than any command ever could." 4 minutes after the call, the revolving glass door turned once more. 2 men entered, one tall, wearing a deep blue overcoat, carrying a brown leather briefcase. The other lean, dressed in a fitted grey suit, a Bluetooth headset in his ear. No one asked who they were. Just the way they walked in was enough to tell the entire lobby. They didn't need permission. They were the permission. Avery gave a subtle nod. William Langston, Julian Barrett. Her right and left hands. Men who carried not just authority, but truth. The 3 stood together without explanations, without raising their voices. The air in the hotel lobby grew still, like sound itself had been drained from the room. Monica emerged from the office, her eyes scanning the space before freezing the moment she saw Avery standing between them. She stopped in her tracks, clipboard tilted awkwardly in her hand. William didn't ask for names. He asked only one question, voice calm and cold. Why was our CEO questioned by security, asked to leave the lobby, and denied access to the very suite she personally approved? Monica stammered. Julian held up a printed email dated 2 weeks prior. This is the audit notice. We clearly stated that the CEO could arrive at any time, unannounced, without symbols of status. Monica mumbled, "I didn't know it would be today." "That's the problem," Avery replied. "It's because you didn't know you were being observed that your true self was revealed." Julian projected a security recording onto the large screen behind the front desk. 30 seconds captured everything. Monica's snide remarks, Trey's dismissive tone, Gavin's silent intimidation. No one spoke, because everything had already been said in what had been recorded. Pamela stepped forward, hands trembling, holding up her phone. I captured part of it too." She didn't finish. William nodded without hesitation. "Send it to headquarters immediately." Monica took a step back, her grip on the clipboard whitening her knuckles. Avery looked at her, voice soft but firm. "You didn't think I belonged. What about now?" Monica didn't answer. She didn't need to. Night fell over Charleston with the quiet of a city trying to hide its memories. In Suite 1702, furnished as if to impress those too weary to care, Avery sat still at a mahogany desk, the blue glow of her laptop screen reflecting off the tension in her cheekbones. She didn't open her emails, didn't check her meeting schedule, didn't scan any numbers. Instead, she opened a blank document, and her fingers began to type with the reflex of someone who had lived too long in silence. "Mom, today I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam the table, didn't try to convince anyone to believe who I am. I just stood there, let them look at me, decide I didn't belong, and then I let time prove just how wrong they were." The words appeared slowly, not meant for anyone but herself, a way to exhale what could never be said aloud. Avery remembered Monica's eyes, the programmed tightness of her brows, remembered Trey's smug voice disguised as politeness, remembered how Gavin never looked her in the eye, yet made it clear her presence was a threat in his. She also remembered how it felt to stand there, silent under doubting eyes, just like years ago, when she stood in a hospital waiting room, wiping dried blood. No one noticed on the face bowed over it. "You once told me silence could cut deeper than words," she typed. "I think you were right. But today, silence didn't just cut them. It cut into me, too." Avery didn't cry. She had learned early on that the tears of a black woman, once seen, are weaponized as weakness rather than proof of endurance. "I'm not tired of fighting," she wrote. "I'm tired of always having to begin from someone else's doubt. Even when my name is on the contract, even when I sign their paychecks, I'm still looked at like I don't belong." She paused, eyes drifting to the glass doors where the city shimmered in the distance under faint golden lights. She thought of the girls who would come after her, wearing hoodies, sneakers, stepping into hotel lobbies, and finally being seen with the eyes they deserve, not as a problem to be filtered out. "I won't quit, Mom," she typed the final line. "But tonight, I needed to say this to someone before I returned to being unbreakable." And then, without hesitation, she closed the laptop. No save, no send, because this letter didn't need to be read. It just needed to be written, so Avery could still hold on to a part of the girl who once whispered to her mother, "One day, I'll own something." And tonight, she stood inside that very thing, not to enjoy it, but to protect it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the glass panels of the Fairborn Hotel, but it wasn't enough to dissolve the heaviness that lingered in the air. Inside the staff meeting room, chairs were arranged in neat rows. The projector was ready, but no one spoke. People entered one by one, tension plain on their faces. Trey kept his head down. Pamela sat quietly in the corner, and Monica was nowhere to be seen. William stood at the front, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the room as if weighing each person's honesty. Julian adjusted the projector while Avery stood in the center of the room. No desk, no chair, no need for introductions. She didn't speak right away, only waited until the room settled into silence before speaking, her voice low and firm, like tempered steel. Last night, most of you didn't recognize who I was, and that didn't make me sad. What disappointed me was how you reacted to someone you thought didn't deserve respect. The projector lit up, and footage from the previous night played. The looks of contempt, the cold tones, the dismissive gestures. No audio was needed. The expressions said enough. Avery didn't call out names. She didn't single anyone out. She simply let the images speak for themselves. I didn't come here to punish anyone, she continued. I came to see whether the culture we built holds up when no one's watching. William stepped in to announce Monica's indefinite suspension, Trey's mandatory enrollment in a training program on bias and customer relations, and a full retraining for the entire team starting the following week. No one objected. No one argued. Because they knew there was nothing left to justify. Avery turned to Pamela, her tone softer. You didn't record that clip to draw attention. You did it because you knew what was right. Then she looked to Elise, the quiet woman who had brought a glass of water in a gesture more powerful than words. You didn't need to raise your voice to prove you were right. You just held on to your dignity. Elise nodded and replied with a single sentence. I did what I always wished someone had done for me. The room fell into silence. Not out of fear, but because for the first time in years, everyone was forced to truly look at themselves. Julian spoke gently, like closing a chapter, but also sounding a warning. From today forward, the biases you carry in your hearts are the greatest risk to this brand. Avery didn't add anything. She simply looked at each face in front of her, as if planting a seed of awakening. There was no applause, no dramatic conclusion. Just the quiet hope that no one would forget what it felt like this morning, to see themselves in images that could never be erased. When all the meetings had ended, the decisions made, and the once avoided gazes finally turned to face the truth, Avery walked out of the conference room without a farewell, without a round of applause. She didn't need any of it, because her role that day wasn't to inspire. It was to force others to confront the unconscious parts of themselves. The hallway leading to the main lobby was long and quiet, the sound of her heels tapping steadily on the polished stone floor, echoing each moment from the night before. As she neared the reception area, she stopped in front of the daily announcement board, usually used for work schedules, temporary menus, or forgotten memos. No one really paid attention to it, but today she wanted it to become something that could not be ignored. From the pocket of her coat, she took out a piece of ivory-colored paper. There was no logo, no header, no identifying mark. Only 12 words printed in bold, centered neatly on the page. Don't just teach them to serve. Teach them to see the person. She pinned the paper squarely at the center of the board, without leaving a note, without writing her name, without needing anyone to witness it. It wasn't a message for that morning. It was a message for the mornings to come, when things had returned to normal, when someone new walked into the lobby wearing an outdated coat or carrying tired eyes, and an employee would have to ask themselves, does this person deserve respect or only suspicion? After that, Avery stepped into the small cafe area where a few couples were ordering breakfast and staff were busy preparing trays of drinks and pastries. She didn't stop to inspect anything, nor did she give instructions. She didn't need to control anymore. She simply observed, quietly, like a gardener walking through soil that had just been turned after a storm, not ready to sow seeds yet, but needing to know the ground was prepared. And in that moment, she was no longer the CEO. She was the keeper of the memory of a night that fractured a system. And from that fracture, a new culture would begin. Not with slogans, but with the way people are seen for real. In the world of hospitality, you are not only judged by how warmly you greet familiar guests, but by how you treat those you believe are unimportant. Avery's story is not simply a personal incident. It is a mirror held up to a system where unconscious bias can destroy trust in a matter of minutes. If you believe that respect should be a principle, not a privilege, then like this video and subscribe so you don't miss stories that awaken awareness like this one. And don't forget to leave a comment with the phrase, "Look deeper," if you resonate with the message Avery left behind.